Hi everyone. This is it's essentially the 21-week update. I'm actually 22 weeks today, but I went last week for my anatomy ultrasound, and everything looks really good. I was 21 weeks on the day of the ultrasound, and they checked everything out and said everything looks really good. And he measured based on his size and his bone length and his whatever lengths that they do was exactly 21 weeks. So doc told me it can't get better than that. It's perfect. So I know the parents were a little maybe concerned, I guess, that the due date was wrong, which I found really funny because we know exactly how old that baby was when he went in there. We know the exact date of conception and we know the exact age of the embryo. So I just thought it was really funny that they were like, can you just have him confirm the due date? Like, it was just really funny to me. So, but he said everything looks really good. He looks perfect. He's measuring nice and good. He's definitely a boy. He said that the AFI amniotic fluid index, which is the numbers that they use to gauge whether you have too much, a normal amount, or too little amniotic fluid, was on the higher end of normal. He said that explains why my uterus measures bigger than the gestational age, because generally around 20 weeks, your uterus, I think maybe it has to be in centimeters. In centimeters, it basically correlates to how many weeks you are. So if you're 20 weeks, the uterus should be sitting right about your belly button. And that is about 20 centimeters from your pubic bone where they measure it from. However, at my 17-week appointment, I think I mentioned it, maybe I didn't, it was measuring 19 weeks. So it was already at that 20-week mark where it should have been 3 weeks. Essentially, it was saying it was 2 weeks ahead or higher than it should have been. But he said that explains why it's measuring bigger like that, is because it's got a lot of fluid in there. He was not concerned. He didn't think anything was wrong. He said it looks really good. So he's a happy little camper in there. I told my husband it feels like having a small squirrel live in your stomach, because he's constantly moving. And when he moves, he is so strong when he does things. And he just flips and he turns and he's moving. And doc told me he was breech, and I said, yeah, I know, because I can feel him dancing on my butthole, because that's what I can feel him like, is down there in my back parts. But yeah, he looks really good. I do a little research this last month on some things, because there was not problems, but I guess maybe misunderstandings since the last appointment. The 17-week appointment, we didn't do anything. We just listened to heart tones, and that's for women who have been pregnant in the U.S., that's pretty much standard of care. You have a couple, maybe 1 or 2 ultrasounds in the beginning, depending, and then you have one at your 20 weeks. And generally, if that looks okay, they most likely don't do another one unless needed or unless asked for or something like that, until the end, like your 35, 37 weeks just before delivery. I got that ultrasound only with my last child because I asked for it, because my second pregnancy resulted in what's called a brachial plexus. My son had like nerve damage in his shoulder right here. It caused lack of movement and lack of use of his, I think it's his left arm. And I was very nervous going into my last pregnancy that was going to happen again, because we had to go to like physical therapy. We do x-rays and all these different, we had to look at it and make sure that it wasn't broken, there wasn't structural damage. My son's 15 in 2 months, and he is only just noticing issues from it. So when I had my youngest, who is now 12, I told her what happened, and she said, okay, we'll just go in and make sure he's not too big, because to her it sounded like it might have been a shoulder dystocia that caused the damage. Shoulder dystocia is where the shoulders are essentially bigger than the head, so they kind of get stuck, and it can cause some nerve damage and break bones and things like that if not handled properly. And that's essentially what happened, is we had some nerve damage and his arm was just a limp, floppy noodle. So I had that like 37-week ultrasound with my middle son, However, or excuse me, with my youngest son, but I didn't with my other pregnancies. So I had my beginning ultrasound, I had my fancy ultrasound that was just becoming popular, where you go and find out the sex of your baby, and then I had my 20-week, and I didn't have anything else. My parents this time didn't understand that. So when I sent them video of heart tones, because I was like, oh, look, they'll get to hear. I guess it didn't dawn on me that they had already heard the heartbeat, like on ultrasounds and stuff. But they, I try to send them updates like that and video everything I can when we go. And she is always super, super, super nice. But just something in the way she kind of communicated back to me this time, I was like, what's that about? And the following day, I got a message from my agency coordinator, the surrogate coordinator with the agency, asking how my visit went, which I'd already told her, which was super weird. And she asked me, she was just being weird. And I was like, why are you being weird? And she said, well, did you have an ultrasound yesterday? And I'm like, no, it was a 17-week visit. We just did heart tones. I said, I sent the parents that. And she goes, that's what I thought. She goes, hang on, let me look. My dogs are coming in. There. Hi, Miss Molly. Huh? Hi, Miss Maddie. She's my big girl. Oh no, ding dong, go. So they didn't understand, I guess, that all of the all of the appointments wouldn't be ultrasounds. And I thought at first maybe it was just, come on, stop. I thought at first maybe it was just because we had so many. In this process, you have like an ultrasound almost every week. Move, Pete. In the beginning until you're released to your OB. I had an ultrasound. Go on, get out of here. Go. Thank you. She's gonna lay down on the bed that she's not supposed to be laying on now and watch us. We had an ultrasound so many times. Between March and, we transferred, March to June, March, April, May, like what is that, like 4 months or something? We had ultrasounds, it seemed like every week or every other week. It was insane. And so then we got to the OB's office. We had the initial nuchal translucency, which was at 11-ish, 12-ish weeks, something like that, 14, I don't know, something like that. And then we didn't have anything the next time, and then this time we did. And then from here on out, he said, basically, we don't need it. There's no point in it. And so when they were upset because, or at least my understanding is they were upset because why wasn't there an ultrasound, or at least they just didn't understand. So I had to do a little research, and I contacted one of the physicians I work with who is Chinese, and he's from China, and I found a blog actually from what I believe is an American couple, because they, one, speak English, and two, the blog is compares a lot of Chinese practices to American practices, and they actually delivered, I guess, one of their children in China. I think they were in Beijing, and they go through the process, how different it is, and how you're, like all the little parts that are so different. Here we're like, hey, you go get the service and then you're paid. But no, they're like, you pay up front, you don't get anything done until it's done, and you have like all these vouchers. It was just it was interesting to read how it's so very different. And I contacted them on WeChat because I really wanted to know, was this a lack of education? Maybe prenatal care is similar in China and they just don't know it because they haven't been through it, or is this a cultural thing? Because if it's a cultural thing, I can't re-educate that. I can only tell them what it's like in America, because we all know cultures very differently, or at least, even in America, cultures vary differently. And so I really wanted to know if this was just maybe lack of education on my parents' part, or if it was cultural differences between American healthcare and Chinese healthcare. And I explained to them, here's the situation. They're kind of expecting ultrasounds every time, and they're kind of getting upset, and I is this just educational, or what is it cultural? And his response, it was the husband, I guess, who responded. He said, absolutely a cultural thing. He goes, in China, essentially, if you have the money, you can have an ultrasound every single visit. And the wealthier families in China, which I have come to learn since then, are the families mostly who can afford American surrogates, is my understanding from some other surrogates who are from China. Not that they live in China, they live in America, they are American citizens, but they are of Chinese descent or somehow become American citizens, something like that. She's in one of my groups, and said that essentially if you have the money for it, you can get an ultrasound every single visit if you want it. And I confirmed this with the Chinese doc that I work with. He said they do a lot more ultrasounds in China. He said because it's so low risk and you can see the growth better. But he said like they do the nuchal translucency, and then around 20 weeks they do the anatomy scan, and then at like 28 weeks or something they do a cardiac screening, and then there's some other one that they do, and then they do like a fetal weight when it's almost time. So I mean, really they're getting an ultrasound basically every time after 20 weeks is what it sounds like. So I mean, that was real surprising to me, and I tried to re-explain to the parents that they didn't understand, if we're not seeing him on ultrasound, how do we know he's growing? How do we know he's okay? How do we know he's in position? And I say, there's other ways that we use, other things that we use, feeling the belly, listening to the heart tones. If heart tones are okay, that means he's okay. Measuring the belly, making sure that the belly's big enough. Think other sources of information rather than putting the ultrasound to the abdomen, because in America, we don't normally pay for it, so it gets a little bit expensive, and insurance companies don't pay for it unless it's necessary. It's not like we can just say, hey, we need this, I want this, and my insurance is going to cover it. So, and I really don't want my parents to have to pay whatever the cost is for the ultrasound on top of it, but I told them if they really want it, and my doctor said the same, if they really want it, we will do it. I explained to him the situation, and he said, we'll do one every time, I don't care. And I said, well, no, because my insurance is going to cover it, then they have to pay for it, and I don't want them to have to pay for it. They're already paying for so much. So yeah, it was interesting to see that difference between the two, and see that, the care, even in just something that we just kind of go, oh, okay, this is it, no big deal. Or something that we expect is just so different. They were just not expecting to not have an ultrasound every visit. So that was very surprising to me. Can we please, I'm gonna squirrel for a second. Can we please just look at her? She's insane. I don't understand boxers, you guys. They're fucking nuts. So it was interesting to see that cultural difference. And I'm noticing some cultural differences here. And I did some more research again, because like I said, I wanted to know, and looked up some like cultural Chinese customs and concerns and things like, I guess in traditional Chinese customs is you're not supposed to stress the mother out while she's pregnant at all, because the fear is that the stress can not affect the baby, but the baby will absorb that and be a stressful person, I guess. You're not supposed to speak poorly of people while you're pregnant, because then superstition is that, they believe that the child will absorb the personalities and the traits of the person that you are speaking poorly of. Things like this. I thought it was very, very interesting. So those of you who have parents in China or in other countries who are in no way similar to American families, I really encourage you to do just a little bit of research on the customary differences in pregnancy beliefs and prenatal care, because it's really interesting. I would have never, ever thought of something like, don't badmouth somebody because the baby will take on the traits of that person. But I find myself, since I found it, trying to abide by this, like not get upset with people, and if somebody frustrates me, to not vent that frustration out loud to someone, because I want to try to accommodate their customs as well. I mean, I know they're not here to see it, but at the same time, I still really want to try to be as close as you can to their customs. So it was just really interesting for me to read. Yeah. So yeah, that's about it. That's all that's been going on. That, and I had to buy new clothes, and I had to buy new undergarments, which caused me into a small panic attack. I bought my very first maternity shirt this week, not just big girl shirts. What? So I have a maternity shirt that I can actually breathe in, which is super fun. Other than that, we're just growing a fetus. I keep trying to get video of him moving because he just moves so much, and it just shakes my whole jiggly belly. But I can't quite. You can see it in person, but it's just so hard to see on video. So maybe the next update. Next time, I think what we're going to talk about is maybe some not contract stuff, but agency stuff, like going agency versus indie, and the difference between the two, because I have had agency. Obviously I work with an agency this time, but I did connect with somebody in between parents, or between attempts here, with somebody independently, and it was a very different process, and I want to discuss that a little bit and see the differences there. So I will see you guys all next time, and next time we'll be at 25 weeks, so we only have 3 more weeks to go, and we will hopefully get our horrible glucose screening scheduled at that point, and everything will be okay. It's all been good so far. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.